Right, so thank you all very much for coming to our presentation. I am Pauline Moore, and my colleague here is Ana Abigahil Flores Hernandez. We are both with the Faculty of Languages in the Universidad Autónoma del Estado de México. I am a full-time teacher, and Abby is doing her postdoctoral research as part of a CONACYT funded project. And this project aims to design a learner corpus, and we called it the Mexican Learner Corpus. And today what we're going to talk to you about, we've just finishing up our first year with this project. We're hoping to get finance for a second year, and we're going to talk to you about the challenges and the applications of what we've been doing, because the intention here is to produce a learner corpus of Mexican learners, which is open for use by all other researchers. So thank you again for coming. And just going to give you a quick outline of what we plan to talk about today. We're going to give you a quick introduction where we're going to talk about what is a corpus, how they work, and what's a learner corpus. Then we're going to give you much more information about the actual project, the MexLeC project, which is the Mexican Learner Corpus project. I'm going to talk a bit about what our data look like and the kind of applications that you can use this data for. And then we're going to talk about the challenges and the questions of accessibility that we've been working with. So just getting straight into this, I'm going to talk about what is an actual corpus. So a corpus is a very, very large collection of text. That text can be either written language or it can be oral language. So for example, the COCA, the Corpus of Contemporary American English, includes mostly written text, but it also includes some oral text. The BNC is mostly oral text. And the Real Academia Española has actually two corpus. One is a synchronic, a recent corpus, which is not the CORDE, it's the CREA. And the CREA is mostly, again, mostly written text. There are some oral text there. They're always, it's a very, very large amount of text, which is stored in a database, usually an electronic database. And the fact that it's in an electronic database makes it accessible for machine reading. And then there are special machines called concordancers, which we use to go into the data and to find like frequency information or information about the way in which words pattern together, the way in which words work together. Learner corpora are slightly different because what they are collections of text which have been produced by language learners. And examples of those are the ICLE, which for example is from the University of Louvain, and also the Trinity Lancaster corpus. And that is a collection of the transcriptions of interviews from Trinity exams, and that's been put together by Lancaster, and there's online access to it, and very, very interesting. And now, what are learner corpora actually useful for? Because they're slightly different from general corpus. And what they're mostly used for are two separate but slightly related functions. So on the one hand, they contribute a lot to second language acquisition theory because they show us a very, very clear and authentic representation of the way in which learners actually use language. And then the second way in which learner corpora are used are they're used to develop pedagogical tools and didactic materials, and those materials should reflect more clearly the way language learners really use the language. Okay, so as I said, the first kind of application is in second language acquisition research, and this is from a recent, these are a couple of screenshots just from a recent Congress on corpus use in language. And you can see the ideas that the people are working with phrasal verbs, they're working with different variables. It is quite quantitative, the work that's mostly done in corpora. Then there's a question of the effect of the task itself on how fluent the writers are. There's questions of writing complexity, work with collocations here with these light verbs, do, have, make, give, and take. We'll see a couple of examples of that in the data that we look at. So that's one way, again, in which we use learner corpora. And a second way is that we use learner corpora to design materials. So here's a book by Cambridge English, and it has been informed by the data from the Cambridge English corpus. And here, this little exercise is an error correction exercise. And what they've done is they've taken actual usage from the corpus and they have polished it up a little bit, but they still left the mistake in. And the idea is that the students will be correcting mistakes, which are much more like the mistakes that the students actually make.
Well, now I'd like to talk a bit about this project, Mexican Learner Corpus. Well, gathering the data we need for SLA research is a time-consuming process. So we have to create, we have to design, we have to test our instruments, we have to do the transcriptions, we have to apply the interviews or train the interviewers, and we have to classify all this information we gather. And if we could save this time by having a reliable and big enough source of data for SLA research and EOT, we could be able to save all this time to go further in our analysis and in our research interest. Well, second, most of the corpora available are synchronic and written. They collect information from learners only once. And I think it's important to have a collection in which we have production of learners in different moments so we can really track their development and their acquisition of language. And having more spontaneous data as spoken production, it is useful because we can really access their grammar and their vocabulary size. They have no opportunity to prepare what they are producing. And finally, it is important to mention that we, of course, have important learner corpora and big enough learner corpora and reliable learner corpora as Trinity Lancaster Corpus or Cambridge English Corpus or EATLE, but they are not open access, fortunately. You have to pay to use them or sometimes you don't have access because they are for private use. So that's why in Mexican Learner Corpus, the aim is and open access, reliable, spoken, multi-level and longitudinal corpus of Mexican learners of English, of materials for ELC and research in SLA. And we have decided to collect this information from undergraduate learners from first to eighth semester that covers the levels A1. And to use a semi-guided interview, we designed that is about 10 to 15 minutes according to the level of the learner. Now I'm going to talk about the rationale behind the interview we designed for MexLeC. These are 3 steps we follow. First, we analyzed 129 English learner corpora, and we evaluated their aims, their tasks, the data they produce, and the application of these data for ELT and SLA research. And we decided we wanted to have spontaneous data, so we created an oral interview. And we wanted a minimum participation of the interviewer so we could have long turns that are easier to transcribe and also to analyze. And we wanted to use general topics. This could be easily comparable, and we could easily replicate this research with any other. And to decide the timing of each task, we went to the timing used in the common examinations in Mexico that are Cambridge GSO, Trinity GC, and TOEFL. And we have an idea of what was the suitable time for each of our tasks. And we also took into account the Common European Framework to decide which of the tasks and questions were suitable for each level of the participants and learners. So they feel free and fluent when they were producing spoken discourse. This is the result of the previous process. This is MexLeC interview. This is 10 to 15 minutes, more or less, according to the level of the learner. And it's got 4 parts. Part 1, you are going to find general questions like, what do you do? Tell me about your friends, or tell me about your family. And these type of questions are suitable for the levels A1 and higher. And then we go to the part 2. They have to answer a question in which they have a decision, but it's a simple decision. Like when you have some free time, do you prefer staying at home or going out? And this is suitable for the levels A1 and higher. At part 3, they have a narrative. So they have a sequence of images, here is, and they have to create a story, and they have 2 minutes more or less, and this is suitable for the levels A2 and higher. And finally, we've got part 4 that we haven't applied because we don't have this level yet. And these are argumentative questions which you have to set your point and support your answer. This is an example. Do you think mobile devices have destroyed communication or they have made it? They have one answer, and this is suitable since level B1 and higher. Additionally, we created a guide for the interviewer, we created a guide for the participant, and we created a questionnaire to make a learner profile in which you are going to find questions about name, age, and information about previous English language and other languages they are learning and mother tongue.
Thank you. Now to talk a bit more about the kind of data that we're getting from this interview procedure. What I want you to look at here is these are very, very short extracts from responses from students who are A1 and A2 to the decision task, which is part 2 of the interview. And the question there was, do you think it's better to study or to work? And I think, for example, here we can see there's very interesting use of vocabulary. So the A1 student here is saying that they think it's important to study because if you have a degree, it's easier for you to find a job. I'm not always sure that you find a job, so I don't know really at this time, but for me it's more important to study. And so they're not really, you know, they're being non-committal. And I think what you can notice there is that this is fairly fluent use of language. There's not a huge amount of or a very great range of vocabulary, but it is well employed. And that very interesting use there of degree, which is the perfect word for licenciatura. Whereas the A2 student is using a Spanish language calc. Here you're saying that you need a title, tipo título, which is not exactly the right word. And remember, we talked a bit about collocations earlier, and so we have, instead of I will make money, the student says I will do money. So it's that kind of tiny error which is very easy to see in a corpus because you have the written representation of the transcription, and very, very authentic, again, use of language. Other types of data, for example.
Here you are going to find all the words they are producing in this section of the corpus listed by frequency. And as you can see, the word I is the most frequent in this section of the corpus, which is really common in any corpus. But what I found interesting is the use of interjections. We are going to find 3 interjections in the first places of frequency. What can give us an idea of the type of discourse the learners are producing? They are producing a sub-pause speech with not many content words and with lots of hesitation. Well, now using the tool Lanxbox developed by the University of Lancaster, I looked for all the words they are producing after the phrase I like. And as you can see at your right, they say I like games, I like classes, I like online, I like video, and I like English. And I cannot find any other content word here. And if you go to your left, then you are going to find the verbs they are using after I like. I like to play, I like to have, I like to travel. And we could use this information to create some material to teach vocabulary to our students. To teach another type of activities we can use after I like going out, I like eating out, or to teach them, we can use also the verb with ing form. And after I like playing, I like listening, I like watching, or we can use them to teach another ways to say I like I fancy, I'm into, I enjoy, etc. Okay, these last 2 samples are samples from pre-A1 learners. They are answering the question study or work. And as you can see, they contained a lot of pauses. These dots are pauses, and some parts we didn't understand in transcription, and they are using interjections and isolated words mainly. And in this first sample, what I found interesting is the use of student instead of study. And in the second sample, what I found interesting is the way the learner is trying to answer this question. And instead of using isolated words like the first one, he or she is using a chunk that suddenly she or he remembered.
So yeah, and we started a bit to talk about the many challenges that we have faced during this year. And I think one of the important things to point out is to talk about the material selection, just simply the material selection that we were using for that narrative phrase. That took quite a while to find a suitable set of pictures, which we're able to set up a narrative that weren't too complicated, that would be easy to show on screen and for the students to be able to look at and create that narrative from, and also that wouldn't fall into maybe some racist or sexist stereotypes. And another challenge is the sheer volume of work that we have to do. Getting students interested in participating is much more difficult than you might perhaps think. And we do need a lot of data because we do want a really large corpus at the end of the day. So last year, for example, we lifted data from 150 students, but this coming year that we have to lift those 150 students data again and add another 150 for students that are coming in fresh to the faculty. And so that is an enormous amount of work. Very complex, great complexities in the questions of interviewer training, because it is, people are used to doing very rigid, slightly different kinds of exams to have an actual script, and we don't provide a script. But we also then we get into the trouble where you go to all of the cost and all of the investment of training someone as an interviewer, and at the end of the day they say, you know what, I can't at that time. So that does get very complicated. And so a lot of the interviews we've actually ended up Abby has ended up doing herself, and I can't do them because I am a native speaker, and that would create an actual problem there in the interaction. It would make them very difficult to compare between the different interviews. Many other challenges in the transcription. We were showing you there that transcription where you have to show how, like, what pauses there are, how they're filling it in. We have to try to tag as much as possible. In the transcription, a huge challenge is the decision of how we're going to treat errors that the students are making. Not so much phonetic errors, because we took the decision from the very beginning that we weren't going to use a phonetic transcription, that we weren't going to go that, because that is much too time consuming. We hope that in the future we'll come to a point where we will have enough time to make phonetic transcriptions for all of the interviews, and that would be helpful in another way. And then we also have to be careful to redact all of the personal data from the transcription. So if they're using their name in the transcription, we have to be able to redact that out. So that's, again, is another load. On top of the transcription, very complicated. I'm not sure if you know this, but for every minute of oral language that you transcribe, it takes between 5 and 10 minutes to finish that transcription properly, between the actual first draft of the transcription itself, but also moving then on into other people revising those drafts. And so there's a lot there. And when we finally do, which we hope to do, the video recording adaptation, which will help people who are working perhaps in the study of gesture, in here at the bottom, then this is the site, this is the actual website for MexLeC course. If you click on it on your mobile, this is the kind of screen that you'll come into, but you can also use it obviously on a PC or in a tablet.